I think that workers are so key in this because they are the experts of the processes and of their day-to-day work. Often they're not listened to.
So today, really excited to have her guest on the show, Alex Barber. She is the founder of Frontline Sidekicks. She's a coach and consultant in the manufacturing industry and really a leading voice in the empowerment of the frontline workforce. We're going to talk to her today about everything from transformation to workforce change to how do we change the mindset of an industry. Absolutely fascinating conversation, and I hope you enjoy. Alex, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for the invite.
No, of course. I'd love to hear a little bit from you about your background. There aren't many people who are, I guess, what I would call an influencer in the connected worker space. And, you're definitely one of them. So I'd love to hear, how did that come about? What's your background?
Yeah, sure. So I'm actually come from the business side. I was a business student. I studied supply chain and logistics. And I did a graduate program first with Beiersdorf. And part of that program was to also do a rotation in the manufacturing industry. And as a business student, I always thought, I'm going to end up somewhere in strategy, nothing operational. And I just loved it. I loved the people manufacturing. I loved the fast results that you get. I loved the hands-on mentality. And overall, I did a few other rotations, but in the end, I even did like another one in manufacturing because I really knew I wanted to start there. And I ended up after the program as a team leader of a group of like 30 workers in the on the operational side. And 1.5 years later, I was a team leader in the logistics warehouse in the same factory. And yeah, one of the things that I've noticed is I felt like I led my team a little bit different. Maybe partially because I was a business student and I'm not in engineering. I don't have an engineering degree. So on a technical side, I was really reliant on the knowledge and expertise of my workers. So that's why I asked them lots of questions. I listened carefully. I tried to absorb as much as possible. And in the process, I gained their trust. I gained their respect. They felt valued and appreciated. And in the end, that was also seen in the results of the projects and in the productivity. And for me, it was something that I really wanted to change in the industry. I felt like we still lead very differently in manufacturing than we do maybe in other, let's say, white collar jobs or in the office. And that's why I did want to see a different company. So I did a little pit stop at Tesla for 3 months. I knew already then that I wanted to be self-employed, but you can't say no to Tesla. So I wanted to have a look. And yeah, but in the end, I felt like there were some differences, but overall, I still think that it needs changing how we lead in the manufacturing industry. And that was my goal. Overall, I try to now give keynote speeches, participate in podcasts like this to try to get the people to understand how valuable their frontline workforce is and that we need to invest in them. And that's what I do now as a coach and consultant. Investing, helping leaders, doing leadership training for the shop floor managers, to say like this, or for the team overall, and also to help with training and development programs for the frontline workers.
That's really exciting, and we're going to get onto that a little bit, but I'd be fascinated to hear from you. You went from, I guess, more traditional manufacturing into Tesla. What was that like, and what did you notice was different about Tesla versus places you've been before?
Yeah, that's actually a very interesting question. So one of the things that was obviously very different was the speed. And I think Tesla's known for this anyway. So when it comes to change and projects and trying to getting things done and making it happen, Tesla was obviously much faster than being in a traditional corporate environment. On the other hand, something that I also found very positive was that in comparison to maybe in a corporate environment, when it comes to promotions and positions, it's not so much about what degree you have. It's really about your potential, your motivation, and if you've had some sort of experience in the field, and that can be with a degree, that can be with your whatever you have done. So it doesn't have to be necessarily you can become a manager or supervisor without having studied, and I think that's still quite rare, at least in Germany, in a corporate environment.
That's really interesting. How has that, I guess, affected your thinking when you're going out, you're presenting? There's a lot of great content online. You've done a TEDx talk, very vocal in the space. How has that influenced your outlook on the world of leadership?
Yeah, I mean, I think that on the one side, when it comes to leadership, I don't really think that I'm presenting something extremely new. Like, I feel like we already have this form of leadership. You guys talked about it in your first episode with Andy from General Mills, talking about servant leadership. And that's exactly what it is about. And that's also what I want to achieve when I say frontline sidekicks, because for me, it's turning the pyramid around and having the workers as the heroes and the managers, or let's say the company overall, as their sidekicks that support them. And that's what for me servant leadership is about. And I just think because of many reasons, and one of them being the class divide that exists in the industry, this hasn't happened as much as it has in white collar jobs or in office jobs. So that's why I sometimes feel like it should be so obvious. I'm not like inventing anything new, but unfortunately it isn't. And I even at like some of my clients that I went to, you could still see the outdated leadership styles.
And do you think that's something that is changing in the industry? And how do you go into an organization with, let's say, a more traditional leadership style and you take it on a change to become, I guess, more forward thinking, to turn leaders into the sidekicks rather than heroes? How do you do that?
Yeah, that's actually not easy, and it doesn't go from like one workshop and then it's all done. I think it all starts with the management or the CEO, or I usually go into like smaller companies. Obviously, I'm not going to go into a corporate and change the whole culture by myself. That's going to be quite hard. But it starts with the CEO or the factory manager believing in it, because often that's the most important thing. They understand that their workforce is the most important that there is, and including their managers, because in the end, frontline managers lead up to 80% of a company, of a frontline company or a manufacturing company. And they see that there is a need for change, but they don't know how. So I think that's the most important thing, that they understood that part. Often they've already tried some things out and they're somewhere like in between, like we've done maybe some coaching here, many have maybe done like a questionnaire to ask their employees how they're feeling, what can be improved, but often didn't like act on it. So that's usually what I go into. Like I do lots of interviews at the beginning to understand the culture. I also like to go there physically, because it's still something else to ask a question over a questionnaire or in an interview like this than to actually go and see some of the things, some of the habits, what the atmosphere is like, and see how the managers treat the workers, and vice versa, what the workers think of their managers. And that's for me is the starting point. And then it actually goes into a very personalized coaching and change management process. So some need more help with just basic appreciation and listening. Others just need an action plan. Others need maybe, what I also do is mediations, because they can be very old conflicts that have happened over the years. That's why this guy isn't talking to them, or maybe also because you have that class divide, and many people also think, oh, well, my manager, he's just thinks I'm a number and he doesn't really care about me. But in fact, the person doesn't have time because he has to lead, or she, like 30 to 40 people. So it can be a structural change of maybe reducing the amount of people that are led, But mostly it is a mindset change from both sides. And that only can happen with like continuous like workshops, even one-on-one coachings, especially with the managers. Yeah, it's a long process. It takes probably, I mean, I start with like 3 to 6 months programs, and then there is often follow-ups.
Wow, yeah, I can see that. And what is the effect on the organization to not do that? What is the cost of not doing this and why is it important?
Yeah, that's actually the question I get a lot because it's very intangible, right? If you just become like a better leader, if you empower your frontline workforce. But overall, what I can say also from my personal experience, when I did that with my team as much as I could, is you gain so much. You gain like the people are much more motivated and they are going the extra mile. They bring in their ideas because they feel listened to. And in the end, they don't take maybe those sick days because they don't want to come to work or they don't leave the company. So if we turn this around, if you don't do this, people are going to start to leave. There's already a skill shortage. So it's going to be hard to even attract talent if you don't develop them, because one of them, I think, top 5 reasons, I don't remember exactly, but it is definitely career development that people are interested in. And if you can't provide that, and it doesn't have to be that the worker now becomes like the factory manager, but at least to develop them, to develop the skills, the digital skills, but also maybe to do cross-functional swaps so that people can understand maybe more holistically the factory. So if you don't develop your people, you will no longer have people in the future. They will not come to you, and you will greatly suffer from the skill shortage. And if you have the people, alternatively, if they're not motivated, there will be lots of error, low quality, low productivity. So that's exactly what people need to get out of.
And skill shortages has been a big theme. I think we've touched on it in almost every episode so far this season. What are the other impacts on the organization as a whole? Because I know that you've mentioned before that the fourth industrial revolution is stalling. Why is that? Why are workers so key when it comes to the next industrial revolution?
I think that workers are so key in this because they are the experts of the processes and of their day-to-day work. They do this job 8 hours a day and for a long time, some of them for 20 years or 25 years. And when it comes to digitalizing those processes, for example, often they're not listened to. And there comes the engineer, and there comes like maybe an external provider, and maybe even the manager, and decides to automate or digitalize the process. And halfway through, they notice either some of the there's sometimes even digitalizing a process that isn't really efficient. Instead of thinking it new and try to make it better, because they don't know as much. And in my opinion, they're so important because they need to be involved in this process from the very beginning. And obviously, many people are afraid of that because they think, oh, if we involve them, they're going to be afraid because maybe their job is going to be made redundant, or they will resist. But it's actually the opposite. The earlier you involve the people, the earlier you communicate it to them, the earlier they understand what's going on and are not just like, oh, here's the new process, now use it, or the new tool, the better and the less resistant they are to change. And you'll be surprised how much they are involved or want to be involved in this process. And that's why I think it's the most important thing. We cannot automate or digitalize without taking into account the frontline workforce.
And it's really interesting to hear you say, I know that you're based in Germany, you do a lot of work in Germany. How do you think the workers' councils can help with this, or do they hinder? Because in some ways, that's institutionalized in Germany, that workers are involved. And is that setting a shining example, or is it actually a challenge? I'd love to hear your experience with that.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit both. Of course, I understand that there are working councils and they're important. I wish they they didn't have to exist, because if in an ideal situation, the company is taking care of the workers because they understand the importance, and maybe the workers themselves have something to say in a more, let's say, democratized, I don't know how to say, in a more democratic way. And so the ideal situation would be that there was no working council, but I would say, unfortunately, there is one, because we aren't in this ideal situation. And from my experience, they can often be hindering the process. Why? Because, to give you an example, when it comes to training and development, I also we had a new production line. We wanted to do training for the workers, and they were supposed to teach each other. So it was like a train the trainer concept. And we trained a few people, and they then were supposed to train the other operators. And we did a checklist with all of the things that they needed to learn. And then we did the normal, I think that's very common, like also from lean management and TPM, is just like the skill matrix that you have, where you say from 1 to 5, whether one has seen it before, has done it once, is able to do it by themselves, or fully autonomous, and then actually can teach. So we wanted to use that matrix. And we weren't allowed to use it because of the working council, because they said, no, this is an evaluation, and one worker cannot evaluate the other. Although it's not a grade, right? It's not like you can do it and you do it so well. It's just really a tick box to say this person can now work autonomously, and it's signed by both people that they also agree, yes, I feel comfortable now doing it by myself. But yeah, unfortunately, we couldn't do that. So we had to take away all of the grading, to say it like this, because that's how they called it. And it was a little bit more complex to just use the checklist, but you didn't really have the nuance of how far the people were. Or you had to put the team leader or supervisor there to do it. It just wasn't allowed to be done by a coworker. So it's these type of things that make it a little bit more difficult. But at the same time, I think it's often also because the working council still sees digitalization and automation as the enemy. And it shouldn't be like that. I think if the working council is communicated well to and even explained, just the same as the workers, to just say, hey, we actually want to digitalize the process. We want to help and make the life of the operator easier. And this is what's coming, and this is what we need. I actually think that you can have a partner in them. But it is very difficult at the moment. And I think that even there, the mindset needs to change, right? So I think that's very difficult in Germany, yeah.
We have, listening to this podcast, connected leaders who are, either trying to or have already implemented digital transformation. What advice would you give, not just in Germany but beyond? How do you bring your workforce along with you and communicate in a way which is transparent to lead to better adoption of digital tools?
Yeah, you already used the most important word, which is transparency. I think it starts with explaining, why is this happening? What are we doing? Where do we want to go? So they need to be, like I already said earlier, involved from the beginning to understand why we're doing this. How does this affect me? Is it if it's just a digital tool that makes my life easier, great. If it's maybe something that makes our life so much easier that we need 2 people less, then obviously this affects me also in a different way. What happens with those 2 people? Where do they go? So you can't just start a process, have calculated maybe some things as to reduction of the workforce, and hide that. And then in the end, just get rid of 2 people, or not having a plan for them. Especially, I'm sure in a labor shortage, you have a plan for those people because you need them.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that's definitely important. So it starts with the why and how it affects the person and what the goal is and what the benefit of it all is. And then it goes into getting feedback from the operators. And by that, I mean, maybe you have an engineer, an automation engineer, or some sort of like leading the project, but you definitely need to have operators as your members of the team to maybe see, maybe you start a pilot and then they can adjust certain things of the process or of the tool to work better for their day-to-day work. And they should be there throughout the whole process. And then what I also think, what I coincidentally said before regarding the training program, I think when it then comes to implementing it and actually using it, I think a train the trainer program is very good. Why do I say that? Is because the operators are very used to learning from each other. I mean, before there was any type of training tools or any form of training, it was just like, hey, I'm going to go to a new production line. I'm just going to follow this guy for months and then I'll know it. So I think they're more used to learning from peers than now an external person coming and explaining to them, often because that person also doesn't speak the same language. And when I say that, I don't mean language, English or German. I mean the operator language, the day-to-day language that they use, that they know with their tools and their machines. And I think it would be much easier to learn from a colleague and much more effective. I don't think I actually have seen it than to learn just from maybe an external person or maybe just the automation engineer. And lastly, train the trainer. Always take the people that are keen and really motivated to change, because you always have it's kind of like the early adopters, if you wish. You always have the people that are really excited about it and really want to do something. Take those to learn maybe from the engineer or from the external person, and then those will be kind of like your promoters for the process.
That's really interesting, because in software, there's a really great book called Crossing the Chasm. And the idea is that in order to go from the early promoters to the mainstream adopters, you actually need the early promoters to help you do that, to create awareness, to get people involved. And it's interesting to hear you talk about that from a digital transformation point of view. Every factory in the world is going to have people who are, very much forward-thinking, pro-technology, ready to implement something. And it's also going to have people who just don't have time to implement digital transformation. So kind of utilizing those resources is really interesting.
Yeah.
I know that something you're really passionate about as well is how workers are perceived in the 21st century. And you've mentioned a few times about the class divide in manufacturing. What do you think the challenges are that is affecting, I guess, the stereotypes in the market at the moment?
Yeah, I think some of the stereotypes are, for example, that the workers are lazy, that they just want to come to work 8 hours, not think, and go home, that they are just not smart enough to learn new tools, to implement or improve certain processes. And from my experience, that is really just a stereotype that it has grown historically. And it's not really about the people, but it's about the environment and the structures that we've had in the past. And we've had this Tayloristic divide of working on the one side, people who think, and the other side, people who execute. And I understand that this brings a certain amount of efficiency, which is why it was done. But nowadays, efficiency is no longer the most important factor, I think, in manufacturing. It's rather agility and innovation. And in order to get that, you need everyone to think. And the problem is obviously that, yes, there is a difference maybe with regards to education. So maybe an operator doesn't understand all of the connections in a company, why does planning do this? Where does the information from planning come from? And that's why maybe they, on the other hand, get angry at the planners that they keep changing all of the orders on the line, and or that they reduce them because they don't want to have that much inventory, etc. Maybe the connections aren't as clear to many of the operators because they haven't done a 4-year business degree, which is normal. But you really need to have the time and use the time to explain certain things. And on the other hand, that stereotype that goes also the other way around. So, for example, I was a person that always wanted to hear what my workers had to say. Also, like on a personal side, I never assumed that they were any like less intelligent than I was. I actually think I learned more from them than they learned from me, if I'm being very honest. And that's why I also thought that it is really important that we give them a chance. Because I heard very often when we were talking about developing certain workers, it's like, oh, do you see this person on this line, which is maybe a little bit more complicated? And then it was like, no, I don't see him there. But never tried before, never put him there, never gave him a chance, because maybe that person was super demotivated because he has 3 children at home. He earns absolutely very little money. And then in the end, it's just that the demotivation came from a completely different source that made him maybe make more errors in the area that he was right now. But if you were actually listening to that person, take care, see what's going on in the person's life. Why is that person demotivated? And maybe they say, look, I actually would love to do that project. I would be so motivated to go on this new line because I would maybe get a salary increase, and maybe they're motivated by the money, but it doesn't matter as long as they are motivated. Like there can be different source of motivation. And yeah, I just think that we reduce them to, even in our society, we reduce them to say, oh, this person doesn't have a degree or they only have that type of job. Like I don't like, for me, it just doesn't work like that. I grew up, for example, in, if you want to say, in 2 different classes. My father's a doctor and my mom is a dental assistant, and she never studied. And I felt like I saw both sides and how different it was. When they were together, it was fine. But when they separated, I could see the discrepancy. And so overall, I just feel like my mom is as intelligent as my dad. And it doesn't matter whether you studied or not. And I think that's something that we really need to change, that stereotype, that bias that we have of people in the manufacturing industry, because we're losing so much potential.
Something that you keep talking about, which I think is fascinating, is the class divide in manufacturing. And, could not agree more. The workers are sometimes the smartest people in the organization. But moving to that mindset can, not necessarily be easy. How do you manage that kind of mindset and manage any kind of conflict that comes up?
I think one of the things that people also underestimate in the manufacturing industry, we were just talking about the divide between the classes, right? So the stereotype between managers and workers, or blue collar and white collar, if you wish. And I actually think, yes, it needs to have a change in mindset, but I also think that often this doesn't happen overnight, and just being aware of it doesn't work. And there's like, really, people have worked together for 20 years or longer, and then this guy doesn't want to work with that guy. And like I said before, you have that a lot. And one of the tools that I learned, and was because of the experience that I had as a manager myself, is there are lots of conflicts in manufacturing, whether it's between safety and quality and production and logistics versus that guy, and the mechanic versus the operator, and even the operator between each other, that is very harmful to the organization and the collaboration on the shop floor. And that's why I did a mediation training, because it is something that is not really well known on the industry side yet. Mediations from, like, instead of going to court, like, families go to do a mediation, right? So it's pretty much just both of them agreeing to try to work it out between themselves with the help of a mediator. And this is actually becoming quite big on the business side as well, but I don't think it has reached the industry at all. And I think it could be very helpful to have maybe certain colleagues that don't get along to maybe do a mediation, or to even have a full team mediation when you feel like there's too many people like not getting along, we're not getting somewhere as a team, maybe even because also the managers don't lead the way that the team wants, and then everyone is just like getting upset. And I think this is something that in the future would be very helpful, because as a manager, if you're supposed to solve conflict, it's really difficult because you're not neutral. You know the people very well, and you automatically, without even thinking, you will side with someone. So even if like somebody comes, let's say with a conflict, oh, this guy did this, by the time that you say, oh, okay, I understand, and you're just not, the person might interpret it as it like, oh, he's on my side. So it's a very, very tricky situation to be in. And I was in a situation like that as a manager, and I really did not know how to deal with that conflict. And that's why I'm not just saying do a mediation course now, but I think conflict resolution and conflict management is also something that especially shop floor managers or supervisors need to learn, or if not learn, try to deal with it externally.
Alex, it's been absolutely amazing talking to you. Really fascinating to hear what you're talking about. If the listeners are interested in hearing more, in English or German, where can they find out more of the information and more of the media that you're putting out there?
Yeah, sure. So I just published my website. It's frontlinesidekicks.com. You can find anything about like working with me, and also, schedule just to get to know each other. I also have my TEDx talk there and a couple of other podcasts and articles. They're also all on the website. And also stay tuned for my podcast that will come out end of October. It's in German. It's called Sichtwechsel, Schichtwechsel, which pretty much means change the point of view and shift change. It's a wordplay in German, doesn't work in English, unfortunately. But what I want to do there is I want to give the stage to current or former frontline workers. So usually everyone interviews CEOs and managers and experts like we do right now, and it's great. But I feel like in order for people to see the perspective of the workers with regards to maybe digitalization, maybe training, maybe the culture, it can be all the sorts of different current topics with regards to the factory of the future, that they can give their opinions and their point of view. And I will also every now and then give my point of view and try to show people, give them some anecdotes about my time as a manager, and talk about certain workers, what happened on different topics, like maybe worker safety, communication in digitalization projects, etc. I'm excited about it, and I'm hoping that lots of people will tune in as well.
Thanks, Alex. We're going to put links to all of that in the show notes. Highly recommend checking out her stuff, and you're following her on social media as well. She's got some really fascinating content, and it's just so cool to see that the space we're in has grown to a point where we've got influencers and experts who are able to put so much content and experience out there. So Alex, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. This has been ZapChat, and please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.